Welcome back to another video on my channel, and this time it's all about the new Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra and a feature Samsung newly calls Nightography, which is supposed to deliver fantastic images in low light and at night. Let's get started. With the S22 Ultra, Samsung brought the best phone to market they ever manufactured when it comes to photography, and all the other features, including the S Pen features, they are also mind-blowing. And I'm here in the native photo app, if you look at that, and I'm also in Pro mode here, and that Pro mode can actually shoot RAW, and you see this if you go here to the settings and then look down into picture formats, and in picture formats you see RAW copies. So you get from every image you shoot a JPEG as well as a RAW copy. But these RAW images are 10-bit only, and if you really want to get the most out of the phone, you should shoot in Expert RAW. And Expert RAW is a separate app you need to download from the Galaxy Store. And here you have the same capabilities as in the Pro mode in the native photo app, but your RAW files will have 16-bit instead of 10-bit, which gives you more reserves in post-processing. So let's first have a look at the rear camera system of the S22 Ultra. Let's then look into some sample images, and then let's continue by explaining the underlying technology of Nightography. The S22 Ultra has a rear camera system with 4 cameras. We have an ultra wide angle, a wide angle, a 3x telezoom and a 10x telezoom, and the 2 latter mentioned are optical zooms. And the ultra wide angle camera has a very wide field of view of 120 degrees, 12 megapixel resolution. The main camera is the one with 108 megapixel, and that's the one we are talking about in this video. And it has a field of view of 85 degrees, so clearly wide angle, but not as wide as what we have on the ultra wide camera. Then we have the 2 telezooms, 10x optical, and the specs of the 10x optical and the 3x optical are almost the same. On the 10x optical we have a very narrow field of view of 11 degrees, and on the 3x optical we have 36 degrees. And then we have 2 more hardware elements. On the rear side we have a laser autofocus and an LED flashlight, and with this camera system the S22 Ultra has all the ingredients for fantastic images. So let's quickly look at a few sample images from what I call Winter Wonderland in the Swiss mountains, and these images were taken early morning, so they are a bit bluish, but here we go. But the S22 Ultra also shines at night, and here are a few sample images where you see the high quality of these images. Actually, if you would have gone for these type of images some years back, you would have quite some work to invest even on a more professional camera. And the question is, how is Samsung achieving that? And that's what we are going to explore now. The magic of the S22 Ultra is not that it has a night mode that works very well in the way we had it on former smartphones. It's also not its zoom capabilities, although there was a lot of improvement going on this front. It really is what I'm going to tell you in the next minutes. And let's look at an abstract sensor here illustrated by a matrix, and this matrix is full of photo sites. And the native resolution of 108 megapixel actually corresponds to a matrix of 108 mega photosites. And a photosite is an artificial word addressing a site sensitive to photons. You could call them simply light collectors. In order to understand how this works, let's have a quick look at the electromagnetic spectrum as it is illustrated here in the middle of that representation in vertical direction. And only a small section of that spectrum is actually attributed to visible light in the way the human eye and brain are perceiving it. And light, of course, can be considered as a wave, but also as a particle. And on both sides, you can explain different properties of light. And you see on the left-hand side 3 basic colors coming in light waves. You see red, green, and blue. And the 3 colors, red, green, and blue, should actually ring a bell for people halfway familiar with the topic, because that's acronymed as RGB, and everyone has heard about it before. Turning back our attention to this matrix of photosites, which represents the sensor, and zooming in to a 6x6 submatrix of photosites for illustrative purposes, we have now light hitting the sensor, and the light comes with its full color spectrum. But photo sites are only capable to measure the intensity of light. So we talk about luminance, lights, shadows. They cannot per se distinguish the different colors of various elements in the scene in front of the camera. So people came up with the idea of a color filter, and clearly the different colors are represented by different wavelengths in the spectrum of light. And what you see on the left hand side is a blue, a green and a red filter, and they come on top of the photo site, and the blue filter only allows blue light to go through to the photo site, and the green filter only lets pass through green light, and the same applies to the red filter. And in this way the photo site underlying these different color filters measures now the intensity of only blue light, green light and red light. And if we consider that pattern, we find a sub-pattern of a 2x2 matrix here of photo sites with color filters on top of it, and the green color is represented twice as many times than the blue and the red ones in here. And the one who came up with that particular pattern and idea was a gentleman called Bayer, and you actually find his name all over the place in camera technology because everyone is talking about a Bayer color filter. Now there are other patterns you can apply, and they have been used in the past, and there is also a lot of research going on, but that is the most common standard if you talk about a color filter. And the reason why the Bayer color filter puts twice the weight on green is nicely summarized in an article I want to draw your attention to, which you find on the web, where it is explained that the human eye is much more sensitive to green light. And in order to leverage on that and actually use that as an advantage, the weight on green is twice as high as what you have on blue and on red on the Bayer color filter. Samsung incorporates two brilliant ideas into the S22 Ultra, and the first one is pixel binning. I'm going to come to that in a moment, and the second one is adaptive pixels. And adaptive pixels we've not seen before on Samsung smartphones and really moves the needle here. So let's have a look at the left hand side. We have here the native resolution of 108 megapixel, and compared to the size of that main camera sensor, we end up at a pixel size of 0.8 micron. Now, I don't want to talk about pixels here because that is clearly what you find in the specs, but a pixel is the smallest unit referring to the final image. On the hardware side, we really talk about photo sites with color filters on top of it. So we should rather say here 108 mega photo sites with color filters on top of it. Now, what they do in terms of pixel binning is they apply Nona binning, and Nona comes from the number 9, and it means they group together 9 of these photo sites into one super photo site and apply the same color filter on these 9 photo sites. And that's what you see on the right hand side. And in this way you keep the Bayer color pattern, but you create 3 times the size in horizontal and vertical direction of a super photo site. And in terms of area, it's actually a factor of 9 because it's 3 squared. The size of these super photo sites on the right hand side is then 0.8 micron times 3, so we end up at 2.4 micron, which you find in the specs actually of the S22 Ultra. And the resolution is divided by 9, so we go from 108 mega photo sites to 12 mega photo sites here in that representation. And by that, creating these super photo sites and combining them into one and having the same color filter applied to it, that new representation of only 12 mega photo sites is capable of dealing much better with low light, and that is something we've seen before on smartphones and also on cameras, and is the first brilliant idea Samsung incorporated into the S22 Ultra. Since we have now covered Nona binning or pixel binning with grouping 9 photo sites into one super photo site, let's come to the second idea, which is adaptive pixels. And this all happens at the main camera sensor with 108 megapixel, and that sensor automatically now, by the built-in algorithms, detects a low light scene. So it recognizes if a scene has dim light, and then the following happens. If you shoot in 108 megapixel mode, first of all, Nona binning is applied to create these super photo sites, which we saw before, with 3 times the dimension in horizontal and vertical direction and 9 times the area, and also with a lower resolution in the final image of 12 megapixel instead of 108 megapixel. And then an algorithm kicks in, which Samsung calls adaptive pixels, and that shoots 2 images simultaneously, so basically using the information from the 108 megapixel sensor to create one image with 108 megapixel and lots of details, and one image with 12 megapixels, super sensitive to light, very well capable of dealing with low light scenes, and relying on the super photo sites which we saw before in the illustration, and combining them gets us then the best of both worlds, details and low light capabilities. And that is a fantastic idea, works like a charm. I'm going to illustrate this in a moment in a live demonstration. Before doing that, there is one piece of information missing here, namely how do we come to a final image with a pixel resolution at final image site matching the photo site resolution at the hardware sensor site. This process is called demosaicing and relies on a lot of hard, complex and interesting mathematics. And there are also proprietary algorithms by different camera manufacturers how they achieve that. What I explained before can now easily be tested on the S22 Ultra. And I have darkened the studio now. The only light we have is actually some candlelight here. If you want to have a look here, that's all we have. And we have put it aside, so there is some light falling onto that Leica camera. And that's the only light we have in the room. So let's make sure here we are on 4:3. That is not the 108 megapixel modus, so is the normal modus here. I also went for a self timer of 2 seconds, and let's take a shot. This will count down, then it will take the shot. And that's it. And we are in the normal photo mode, by the way. We are not in night mode here. Now let's go to the 108 megapixel setting, and in that mode for which adaptive pixels actually apply. Let's take the same shot. That's it. And by the way, the Samsung phone indicates here by a half moon that we are in a low light environment. So that is indicated easily by the camera. There is another feature we have in the 108 megapixel mode, which is detail enhancer. And that is this icon here. If I push that, it says detail enhancer on, and let's also take a shot with the 108 megapixel mode in this particular one here, and then we can compare them later on. So let's see, the self timer is counting down, the shot is taken, and that's it. And if I switch back now to the normal 4:3 aspect ratio shooting mode here, that detail enhancer is not available, but it still indicates to me that I'm in a dimmed low light environment. Let's now go back to the MacBook and let's look into these images and whether there is any difference recognizable in the outcomes. I've now uploaded these images into Lightroom, and on the left hand side you have the image with the normal 12 megapixel mode, 4:3 aspect ratio, and on the right hand side you have it in the 108 megapixel mode, where we actually have adaptive pixels becoming effective. And if you look at these images, they are both pretty clean. Let's zoom in here to 100%. Clearly you get a much larger size on the right hand side based on the 9 times higher resolution. But in general, both images look actually very good, very clean, very clear. You see on the right hand side on the 108 megapixel image more noise, but that can be corrected easily in post. So no problem on this front. What's really amazing is the level of detail you get on both images. Actually, the left hand side without adaptive pixels also looks very good, but the right hand side is just mind-blowing how it is actually replicating details on the camera body of this Leica Special Edition. Looks really, really good. And except that we have some noise here, this is really a usable image despite the fact that we had a low light environment at its best. And I think the results are really convincing here what the S22 Ultra is delivering. Clearly, for a true like-for-like comparison, I need to take into account that on the 12 megapixel normal mode, and you see here a screenshot from Photoshop, we have only 4K times 3K pixels. Whereas on the 108 megapixel mode with adaptive pixels, we have 9 times the resolution. So what I did in Photoshop is I actually converted the high resolution 108 megapixel mode image into a 12 megapixel image in order to have a like-for-like comparison. Let's now have a look in Lightroom what that really gives us in terms of insights. Here we see now on the left hand side again the original image 12 megapixel normal mode, and on the right hand side we see the converted image from the 108 megapixel mode scaled down to 4K times 3K, which is 12 megapixel. And if I now go into a deep crop here, which I do by zooming in 300% to the image, you see that the right hand side is much, much better compared to the left hand side. You see this in particular in different elements here. If you look at the different buttons here on the Leica camera, the right hand side always is absolutely superior. Look also here, much, much better what we have on that converted image. If we compare like for like, the outcome from the normal 12 megapixel mode compared to 12 megapixel coming from 108 megapixel adaptive pixels. This looks just much better. You also see it here on the screw. The right hand side is really good. The left hand side is at a certain point in time smoothed out. And if we have some noise here still in the background of that Leica camera, I can easily correct this in post-processing. And I think all in we have proof of evidence that this concept from Samsung combining Nona pixel binning with adaptive pixels is really paying back with better image quality under low light conditions. What I did at the end of the live demonstration is something you should really avoid, and that's the last point I want to make here, namely switching in low light the detail enhancer on when you are in the 108 megapixel mode. And you see here the result of my last shot from the live demonstration. It's just a very bad image quality. So don't switch on detail enhancer when you are in 108 megapixel in low light. It doesn't make any sense, and the outcome will be nothing less than totally disappointing. Look at that here, not usable and no match for what we got before when we just kept the detail enhancer switched off. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching, stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.